They have court-martialed them, punished them, say put them in jail, and also sent out of the military. It's a very, it's not that we have not taken any action for any wrongdoers. That's the normal pattern of the armed services. We have many cases where we can discuss, but it's a normal thing in the Sri Lankan military as well. Because I would like to mention here, in 2002, there was a team from the United States Defense Department, Ministry of Defense, sent to Sri Lanka, the invitation of then Prime Minister, and they did a detailed study of the Sri Lankan military. And there's a huge, big report on their findings. And it's very interesting to read that those comments. And they mention about the discipline, and also they mention about the professionalism of the Sri Lankan military. And also they talk about the training, and they mention certain training standards are world class, and they have in fact recommended that our special forces training school be open to many other countries. That was the recommendation done by the United States Defense Department report. And they comment especially on the discipline and the professionalism of the Sri Lankan military. So we have included many human rights and then the laws of international humanitarian law. We have been teaching that in our KDU and all the other military institutions since I think 1990s, for a long period. So we have considered all these things in our military as well. And most of the time, why people criticize is because of not knowing this information. Thank you.
Secretary of Defense, we thank you very much for that response. Let me now ask Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe, who is also advisor on reconciliation, to pose his question.
Thank you. I should just very quickly thank all of you for the 6 excellent presentations that we had, or 7, Rohan, including yours. And I think the range we had is a tribute to what I call the conceptual capacity of the KDU, which is something I miss in some of our traditional universities. I hope very much that the MOU that Professor Mahare Vice Chancellor Mahare has signed with 2 of our 3 leading universities, Colombo and KDU, will, I hope, lead to a much more cutting-edge approach from our 3 leading universities. I include Moratuwa as well. I think the range of activities a university can engage in was suggested by you. I just want to make one suggestion. For long years, I've been arguing that we don't have a publishing industry in this country, and we don't have a university press. And whenever I have said that, I was told about mechanical printing. I was not talking about that. I was talking of a publishing industry. And this takes up some of the points we heard, that what I think is comparatively an excellent story of the Sri Lankan struggle has just not been told. And I think, Vice Chancellor, I think you should set up a press, which is a publishing institute, to commission monographs on a lot of the work that has been done. Some of the stuff mentioned by Mr. Divaratna, I think, needs to be recorded, because we have to get rid of this loose use of the term militarization, which I think is bedeviling us. The continuing involvement of the military in national life is a necessity at this point. However, I think what we know and what we have to develop is the civilian control that I think you exemplified in your presentation, and that I think is necessarily the case. But we're not telling that story very well. And I think it needs to be recorded not in terms of massive volumes, but in short, sharp monographs that actually detail the different areas. For instance, the point you made about the way in which you really magnificently managed to keep people fed was fantastic, but the involvement of the military. Also the fact that the ICRC helped you once and were then threatened and had to withdraw. They took one ship up, if you remember, and then the LTT forced them to withdraw. Now all that needs to be recorded, and we're not doing a good enough job. So Vice Chancellor, I think you have to do it, because no one else is doing publication, and a university press is a necessity. I have two quick questions. General Katak, I thought your presentation was really marvelous and showed deep understanding of the Sri Lankan situation. I think, as we spoke about human rights, I think the Secretary has replied, but I think what we also have to remember is that while human rights is extremely important, and I think the points you made need to be carried out, we have also got to remember that in the modern world, human rights is also used as a weapon of war. We have seen that far too often in the last year internationally. And I think the selectivity with which it's applied, not hypocritically, people genuinely believe that what they do is necessary and what other people do is wicked. And I think we really need to recognize that the way this instrument is being used is as oppressive as violations of human rights are. And this is something I think everyone needs to keep in mind. Having said that, I think one point you made, I think we need to look at, and it shows the changing context. You mentioned the word federalism. And I belong to a generation that in the 80s thought this was a good thing. Because in the 80s, we all thought that federalism, as in India, as in the United States, as in Germany, was a way of bringing people together. Unity in diversity. And your point about rejecting uniformity, but encouraging unity is vital. Regrettably, in the post-Cold War situation, federalism has become an instrument of identifying possible separation. Unfortunately, this began with the breakup of the Soviet Union, which, as we know, was voluntary. But what subsequently followed in areas like the former Yugoslavia, or indeed Sudan and so on, suggests that we now have to be very careful, and I believe India must also be very careful about the use of federal structures to promote separatism. So I think we now have to be more careful than we were 25 years ago about the structure of political solutions. Local empowerment is, I think, vital. But I think the word federalism is perhaps something that cannot be thrown about as loosely as it was used 25 years ago, simply because the world has changed. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring this session to a close in the interest of time. But certainly in doing so, I would like to make three remarks. One is that KDU as an institution of learning has been commended. But I would like to say that we all congratulate the Vice Chancellor and the KDU staff for organizing this impressive event, focusing on a theme of the future. So in many ways, you are a brain box for the future of Sri Lanka. And it is a great tradition that you have maintained because you produced the best warfighters when there was such a great need. But I believe that you will produce the next generation of peacemakers and of champions. Aspect I want to share with you is going back to my earlier presentation. Today the LTT has transformed from an insurgent and a terrorist group into a criminal organization and an organization that is a propaganda organization. So in many ways, you may hear information that is not true, and that is why today there's a very effective program that has been created to invite people who are living overseas, who may be subjected to that propaganda, to come and see And I want to say that many people who have visited the Northeast have come back with a different impression. Personally, for me, Secretary of Defense referred to the rehabilitation program, a program that I have been involved since day one. I mentioned to Secretary of Defense, I do not know whether he recalls, but he had a civilian Commissioner General of Rehabilitation. And I told him that the program was moving very slowly because it was essential to get a military man there to speed up the program. Because in many ways, when the war ended, the civilian infrastructure and the administration had been destroyed. And it was essential to use whoever was there to rebuild the Northeast. So I personally believe that there is a phasing out from the military to the civilian. But it was essential to work with the military at that time because the civilian infrastructure was destroyed. So all this development that has been achieved could not have been achieved if the military withdrew and they said, we are only war fighters. We are not going to do development. So I presume that Sri Lanka developed a very unique homegrown solution in the post-conflict stage too. The third aspect that I want to share with you is the developments in South Asia. The president of the Pakistan National Defense University spoke of the challenges that his country is facing. And I believe looking at South Asia, parts of South Asia will remain in turmoil in the coming years. But in many ways, today Sri Lanka is one of the safest countries in the world. Stability has been restored. And at least in the subcontinent, there's tremendous stability that has been created not only in Sri Lanka but in a part of the Indian Ocean. And if instability remained, I believe that the overall development in this region would have been stifled. So the potential and the promise of Sri Lanka is immense. And I believe that the military is largely responsible for spearheading that development. And today it is a challenge for the civilian leaders, for the political leaders to take up. But military certainly must maintain a very sharp eye, the security and intelligence services, to prevent a revival of terrorism. Because still there are some extremist elements that are operating. So I believe that the military and the security and intelligence services still have a very significant role to ensure in the long-term stability and security of our country. Let me take this opportunity to say that future generations of Sri Lankans will be grateful, eternally grateful to the war fighters of this generation who have sacrificed immensely. Today, whenever I visit military facilities, I see soldiers without eyes, without hands, without legs. And many of our brothers have been killed. Many of our family members, extended family, they have been killed. So I think that Sri Lanka achieved this through great sacrifice and great pain. And many families still live in pain. There are many children without their fathers. So I believe that today the responsibility is beyond the military. There must be a whole of nation approach to ensure stability and security. And I believe that KDU will create the mentality among the emerging leaders so that they will work with those agencies, those national agencies, to create a greater national perspective to safeguard and secure Sri Lanka. I thank you very much.